And we welcome you back to WHTC's Talk of the Town for this Friday, June the 5th. I'm Gary Stevens. We'll hear from Governor Whitmer following or in lieu of the 11 o'clock news block on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC. First Friday of the month, the 10:30 segment, we are joined by the president of the Holland Area Community Foundation of the Holland Zeeland Area, Mike Goorhouse. He joins us via the Zoom connection. Mike, good morning and happy June. Hang on a second. Oh, you on now? We got you.
Good morning. June is here. My apologies.
That's okay. That's okay. We can be, let's put it this way. On the Zoom connection, we can see each other talk, but our listeners want to hear each other talk. But exactly. You people out there, no, you cannot join the Zoom connection. You need to call us at 395-1450 if you wish to converse with us. Before we talk a little bit about the COVID-19 Community Stabilization Fund that was announced late last month by the Community Foundation of the Holland Zeeland Area, I'm going to throw a tough question at you, Mike. You and Patrick Sizzler and others have been very instrumental in getting CareOttawaCounty.com off the ground in a very short period of time, mobilizing and marshalizing resources in order for the community to be able to help out this. Now we have Holland's signature event, the Tulip Time Festival. They need $1 million in order to remain viable. I'm not saying that the Community Foundation of the Holland Zeeland Area needs to throw the money at them, but the organizational skills, the fundraising skills that you, Mike, Mr. Sizzler, and others are able to come. Can you sort of help the Tulip Time people out in terms of being able to marshal some of the resources so that the festival can stick around?
Sure. Well, Gwen Auerda, who runs Tulip Time, is a fabulous director of Tulip Time. As many people know, she has done a really good job with the festival over the last number of years, and really neat to see that they had established a pattern of breaking even and being consistent every year. Of course, COVID threw a wrench in about everything, but especially their efforts. So I certainly had been talking to Gwen about their efforts, have had a number of conversations with her and with potential folks who may be able to help out, and I know Patrick has as well. But so the short answer is, yeah, I mean, Tulip Time's in a position where, like many of our things happening in our community, they're an institution that has a 1, maybe 2 year gap here where they got to figure out how we can navigate, and then hopefully we can be back to a festival that is self-sustaining. So those tend to be efforts that we can rally around, because it's not like they were turning a $200,000 loss every year and you're wondering, geez, does this still make sense or not? Nope, they were doing great work, and so we just got to get them through this tough time. And so the foundation actually did provide a line of credit, $200,000 line of credit to Tulip Time. We're going to cover the interest for a couple of years to buy them some time. They can pay that back over a 3-year period. So that will help certainly. And yeah, there'll be other contributors who are stepping up, and I would say there's a long ways to go. So if you're considering a possible gift to Tulip Time right now, I would encourage it. I think it is a good use of resources. But yeah, it is a complicated environment. $1 million is a lot, and there's a lot of needs right now. I mean, the convergence of crises that you've heard me talk about isn't going away, and there's more coming. I mean, the racial tensions in our community and around our country is added on top of the things we've been talking about the last couple of months, and so and Tulip Time's a piece of that. So yeah, there's no shortage of places. If you're looking to give, there's a number of places that you can be supportive of, but we are trying to help Gwen and Tulip Time as well.
Yeah, I was more thinking about the brain power and the financial power, because you guys were able to do it with CareOttawaCounty.com. Hey,
no, we're friends with Gwen, and she's reached out, and we've been trying to be helpful. So
okay, no, and we're not casting any aspersions on Gwen Auerda's leadership abilities. We're just trying to augment the efforts to try to save this.
Yep. Yep.
395-1450. If you want to have a question with Mike Goorhouse, he'll be happy to talk about it. And I do want to talk about the current climate.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about the weather climate there, Michael, in a little bit, but I do want to talk a little bit about something that was brought out and introduced by the Community Foundation of the Holland, Zeeland area late last month. It's the COVID-19 Community Stabilization Fund. Tell us about it and what it's intended to do and how people can get involved.
Yep. So from day one, we knew, so we had launched with Care Ottawa County. Part of it was a financial mechanism for people to give. We called it the Emergency Human Needs Fund. And it was really that free fall, rapid response. We raised and distributed $900,000 in about an 9-week period of time. And it was your basic needs. It was food, housing, some healthcare, kind of mental health stuff. And it was the immediate basic needs kind of response. Over that 9 weeks, and we told people this was coming, there was going to be a moment where you needed to flip. And there's always kind of 3 stages to any crisis. There's the free fall, there's the stabilization, and then there's the recovery, right? Now, the length of time of each of those stages is different for every crisis. The depth of all these things is different, but every crisis kind of involves those 3. So in our case, it was about 8-9 weeks of free fall. We felt like we were at a point okay, we got to try to stabilize so that we can recover as a community. And what has happened is we were keeping a really close eye on all the various dollars that were coming into our community, because the public sector, both the state and the federal government, was putting significant resources into our community through stimulus checks, through unemployment checks, through payroll protection program, through specific funding for housing or mental health or whatever, education, dollars to our school districts. And so we were keeping a really close eye on all those dollars to see where they were going, because by nature, the federal response is really generic. Now, they can put a lot of money at it, but it's very generic because it applies to everyone across the country. And we were looking for, what are those gaps? What are those niches? What are those places where the dollars aren't landing, or where maybe the dollars are landing, but the need is so deep that the dollars only got you halfway home. And so we aren't perfect, but we have our ears to the ground and landed on 5 kind of places that we thought were going to be most missed by those other resources, or just not filled up enough. And so we launched a fund. I'll walk through the 5 in a second, but we launched a fund. We put $200,000 of our own capital into the fund. Then we invited some of our partners to also put dollars into the fund to join us in this effort around these 5 kind of approaches. And so far we've had $675,000 that has been given in addition to our $200,000 into the fund. So we have $875,000, which is awesome. Really, really meaningful response. And donations continue to come in, and to address these 5 things. So the first is a strategy around trying to prevent people who are right on the edge from slipping into poverty. So we have the ALICE population. Many in the can be broken up into those that are below the federal poverty line, but then also those that are above the federal poverty line, but are in that kind of ALICE category where they're making it, but barely. They're one kind of cost crisis away from spiraling down into kind of the federal definition of poverty. And so there's a line there that says, and the history and the data will show us that housing's a big piece of that. If you can keep somebody in their house so they don't foreclose or don't become evicted or whatever, that can help prevent the beginning of the spiral. And so there's a whole lens here around how do we prevent people from starting that slide into deeper poverty. Then there's a line that is just the continued basic needs for the folks that are deepest in poverty already. So folks that have lost their jobs, don't have access to some of the federal resources, where food and basic needs continues to be a challenge. And there's more people like that than some people hear this narrative of federal stimulus checks and unemployment. The feds are giving all kinds of money, but there's a number of families in our community that still have that core basic needs. So you got to go talk. Got to do some work there too. The third strategy, those are 2 kind of about financial stability, kind of dollars and cents. The third strategy is around mental health and substance abuse. So we have seen that for many people who have the challenges around substance abuse and mental health, their needs are even deeper right now. And then you also see that there are new people that are experiencing these challenges that haven't before. So for our organizations responding in those two areas, they are seeing deeper needs and broader people. And so we need to put more resources into those efforts. So that will be a third strategy of this fund. A fourth strategy is going to be around access to healthcare. And we learned this back in the 2008-9 crisis, was that most people are used to getting their healthcare through their employer, where they just, they're employed, depending where they work, that determines what kind of healthcare they have and how they go. But with people that are out of work now, having to navigate the public healthcare system, there's a lot of things out there for them, but you have to be able to navigate and access it. And while some listening may say, well, geez, can't someone access it on their own? I'll tell you, if you have ever tried to navigate that system, it is not easy, not intuitive. And so just providing resources to help people navigate if they've never navigated that before, just a side-by-side kind of approach. Because we know that if folks don't have health care, our community pays for that. We pay for that via emergency room visits at the hospitals. We also pay for that in people not doing preventative care. And so then they end up with bigger bills versus what would have been a cheaper fix if someone had regular access to healthcare. So that's the fourth one. And then the fifth one is around education. We are focusing specifically around, there's a whole question around education funding in general for schools. We don't have enough money to fix that one. But what we are focused on is individual kids, particularly younger kids, kind of kindergarten, first, second, third grade kind of age kids who were likely to be at risk for falling behind in the first place. But with the school from home being the route that was taken for the last few months, were even more likely to fall behind. Didn't have access to internet to get the good education, to access education at home. Didn't have an environment at home that was conducive to learning alongside, parent supportive or other kinds of things. And so you basically have a number of young kids who are more or less going to have a 6-month break in their schooling. And when you're a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old, that's a big deal. And we've learned that when you fall behind early in education, it is really hard to catch up. So we're going to spend some dollars trying to find innovative, creative ways that we can support 50, 100, 200, whatever the number is, kids, that we just kind of go out of the box and find a way, how do we help them try to prevent this massive slide during this 6-month period, and hopefully help them kind of stay on track so that as schools kind of work their way to a new normal, these folks don't fall further behind. So it's really, we're calling it the mitigating the opportunity gap. And we use that phrase because for many, the school from home made an opportunity gap. It was their opportunity to learn was different than other young people. And if they were already in a tough spot, that will make that more challenging. So those are the 5 kind of prongs we've identified. We've also committed to being really clear that we're gonna be ears to the ground as the things change. If the federal government passes another CARES Act, for instance, and let's say puts money into one of these areas, well, then we'll pivot, right? So our commitment is to be targeted to what we see as the needs, but those are the 5 kind of broad categories. And folks and people can get involved on our website. It's probably the best way to find out more information, and if you're a representative of a nonprofit or an organization who has an idea in those 5 areas, you can actually sign up on the website, where you can stay up to date about the funding opportunities. There's a little link there, and there's also a link if you want to support the fund and contribute to the fund. Gifts of all sizes are welcomed into this pot, and our commitment is to use the dollars between now and the end of the year. So the stabilization fund is not meant to be a forever fund. It's a stage, and then we'll be kind of in the recovery part. So this fund is very focused on the next kind of six months or so.
Mike, I really need to talk to you about the current atmosphere we're in right now. The passions is a better way of, I'd like to put it, instead of tensions, stemming from the death of George Floyd almost a week and a half ago. The Community Foundation of the Holland Zeeland Area, you sort of touched upon it a little bit earlier, possibly having something in the mix about this to try to help in the situation. Money can't solve the problem, but you certainly getting those resources to the proper things can certainly help.
Sure. Yeah. No, absolutely, Gary. I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, it is a very important moment for our community and our country, and the reality is that we have a long ways to go. A lot has been built into our culture, our society, our systems for a long, long time, and the people of color in our community, particularly the Black community, has been not treated well in our history. Racism is there and alive, and I think for some people, they hear the word racism and they think it's this kind of thing that nobody wants to be racist, right? Nobody wants to say that, but I think it's important for us, particularly for me as a white male, to acknowledge the privilege that I do have, because you have to start there before we can start to make progress. And I think it's really important that we stand alongside and support our brothers and sisters of color in this moment, because there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of hurt, and the first reaction has to be to acknowledge that, give them space to process and grieve, in my opinion. And so the foundation, on Monday, I made a statement on behalf, on the foundation's Facebook page about this. We are internally figuring out kind of what action steps are going to follow, because it can't just be words, it has to be action as well. And so we're putting it together. I wish I had something I could share with you today as to exactly what we're going to do, but we are working on this over the next probably 2 or 3 weeks. But just to share what we are thinking about, I mean, there's kind of 3 pieces to what we're thinking about. The first is, what are we doing internally at the foundation to help our individual staff, board members grow our culture internally? What does our community look like? I think we have to start internal to ourselves first. So we're talking about that. Second, with our resources, we're going to talk about 2 things. One is, how do we stand by and support our communities of color, so they know we're with them and that they have space to process and grieve and grow and advance and move forward. But we are also talking about, how do we use our resources for those of us that are early on in our journeys, where some of the language is hard to understand, or we don't quite resonate with some of the words, or we're early in our journeys, and we need those of us that don't experience racism on a day-to-day basis, white folks, myself included. There's a lot we need to learn so that we can be empathetic and come alongside and support. So they're kind of 2 different angles. How do you stand by in solidarity and support of communities of color, but how do you also engage more people in learning and growing and educating as well? And so we're thinking about both those things and how to use resources on both lines. But the foundation over the years has certainly tried to fund organizations that are working to mitigate these disparate outcomes. I mean, COVID-19 is a perfect example, right? I mean, it was just in the last 3 months, we had this stark example of a disease where the health outcomes, I mean, you couldn't have watched the news without seeing the disparate outcomes for the Black community and Latino community. And it's happening here in the Holland, Zeeland area and in Ottawa County, if you look at the various statistics. And so that's not okay. We can't live in a country where the color of your skin has a direct correlation to your health outcomes. We can't be okay with that. And the path forward is hard. I understand that, and there's a lot of emotions that go into it, but I would hope that we can all agree that the color of one's skin should not correlate to your education outcomes, your health outcomes, your ability to have a thriving life. And if we start there, where we can agree to that, now let's take steps forward. So that's the kind of thing we're wrestling with. And hopefully by next month in July, I'll have something more concrete that I can share with you of what we're trying to do to help.
That's something we can look forward to for July of 2020 in our conversation next month with Mike Goorhouse. Mike, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next month.
Thanks, Gary.
And that is Mike Goorhouse of the Community Foundation of the Holland, Zeeland area on WHTC's Talk of the Town. Peter King will start us with the hour with the CBS News. We'll hear from Governor Whitmer, and then we'll have the WHTC Midday Report at the bottom of the hour on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC.